The consultant told me my $95,000 salary was a waste of resources, but she didn't know I was the only person alive who knew the override code for the corporate data center's cooling system. My name is Tom Reynolds. I'm 55 years old, and I've been the chief systems engineer at Metrotech for 23 years. Before that, I spent 8 years in the Navy working on submarine electronic systems, the kind of systems where if something fails, you don't get a second chance to fix it. When I joined Metrotech in 2001, we were running a data center out of a converted warehouse on the east side of downtown. 3 mainframes, 12 employees, a CEO who still remembered everyone's birthday. Now we occupy 6 floors of a glass tower, process transactions for 340 regional banks, and the current CEO couldn't pick me out of a lineup if his quarterly bonus depended on it. But here's the thing about modern infrastructure. Everyone loves the shiny new servers on the 5th floor, the cloud architecture, the redundant systems that cost $4.2 million to install last year. Nobody thinks about the basement. The basement is where we keep the legacy mainframes. The IBM system Z15ES that have been running continuously since 2008. The cooling systems that were retrofitted in 2003 when we merged with DataCore Solutions. The override protocols that exist in exactly one place. My head. If you've ever worked in a data center, you know that heat is the enemy. Servers generate heat. Lots of it. The cooling system in our basement runs 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It has 3 redundant backup systems, 2 emergency protocols, and 1 manual override sequence that requires physical presence at the control panel and a 47-character alphanumeric code. That code was documented once, in a binder. The binder was stored in a filing cabinet in the IT office at our old location. When we merged with DataCore in 2003, that filing cabinet was supposed to be transferred to the new building. It wasn't. I know this because I spent 3 weeks in 2004 looking for it. Eventually, I gave up. I'd memorized the sequence during the original installation anyway. I figured someday someone would ask about it, and I'd write it down fresh. Nobody ever asked. That's the thing about being the quiet guy in the basement. You become invisible. You're not in meetings. You're not on Slack channels. You're not invited to the company retreats in Scottsdale, where everyone posts photos of themselves doing trust falls. You're just there, keeping the lights on, keeping the servers cool, keeping the transactions flowing so that 340 regional banks can process payroll and mortgages and car loans. My wife, Linda, used to joke that Metrotech would collapse without me. She said it at dinner parties when people asked what I did. Tom keeps the whole thing running, she'd say. They just don't know it. Linda passed away 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 8 months from diagnosis to funeral. I missed exactly 2 days of work. Not because I didn't love her. I loved her more than anything I've ever loved in my life. I missed 2 days because on the 3rd day, I sat in our empty house and realized that the silence was going to kill me faster than any cancer. So I went back to work. The basement doesn't care if you're grieving. The servers hum the same way they always have. The cooling system cycles through its protocols. The red lights blink in patterns I could read in my sleep. There's something comforting about that. About being needed, even if nobody acknowledges it. If you've ever had a boss or been in a situation like this, hit that like button and subscribe. I first heard about Jessica Thornton on a Tuesday, March 14th. I remember because it was the anniversary of Linda's diagnosis, and I was already having a bad week. The email came from HR, company-wide. Metrotech is pleased to announce a strategic partnership with Thornton Consulting Group to optimize our operational efficiency and position the company for sustainable growth in the evolving digital landscape. I read it twice. Then I deleted it and went back to monitoring the cooling system. The thing about corporate consultants is that they all went to the same schools, and they all read the same books, and they all use the same words. Optimization, efficiency, sustainable growth, evolving landscape. What they mean is, we're going to fire people. Jessica Thornton arrived the following Monday. She was maybe 32. Blonde. The kind of haircut that costs $400. She wore a gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and carried a leather portfolio that looked like it had never been touched by human hands. She had an MBA from Northwestern. I know this because she mentioned it 4 times in her first all-hands meeting. Metrotech has incredible potential, she said, standing in front of a PowerPoint presentation with phrases like operational redundancy and resource reallocation floating in colorful bubbles. But we're carrying legacy overhead that's preventing us from achieving true agility. Legacy overhead. I'd been with this company for 23 years. I'd missed my son's high school graduation because the backup cooling system failed, and I had to manually restart the sequence. I'd worked through Christmas Eve in 2019 because a firmware update crashed, and I was the only one who knew the recovery protocol. Legacy overhead. Jessica spent 3 weeks conducting what she called efficiency audits. She walked through every department with a tablet, asking questions and taking notes. She interviewed managers. She reviewed budgets. She created spreadsheets with color-coded cells. She never came to the basement. Not once. I found that interesting. If you're auditing a data center's operational efficiency, you'd think you might want to see the data center. You might want to talk to the person who's kept it running for over 2 decades. But Jessica was optimizing from the top down. She was looking at org charts and salary bands and headcount ratios. She wasn't looking at systems. On April 4th at 2:47 p.m., I got an email from Jessica's assistant. Please report to conference room 3B at 3 p.m. for a brief meeting regarding your role. I knew what it was. I took my time walking up from the basement. I stopped at the vending machine and bought a black coffee. I straightened my tie in the reflection of the glass doors. I thought about Linda and what she would have said. Jessica was waiting in conference room 3B. There was an HR representative sitting behind her with a tablet, not making eye contact. The table had a manila folder in front of the empty chair. Jessica didn't stand up when I entered. Tom, please sit down. I sat. I'm going to be direct with you, she said. We've completed our efficiency audit, and we've identified your position as one of several that represent a suboptimal allocation of resources. Suboptimal allocation. Your salary of $95,000 annually is significantly above market rate for comparable positions. Given the company's investment in modern cloud infrastructure and automated monitoring systems, we've determined that your role has become redundant. She said the word redundant, like she was describing a broken printer. We're prepared to offer you a severance package of 8 weeks' pay, continuation of health benefits for 60 days, and outplacement services to assist with your job search. She slid the manila folder toward me. I looked at it. Then I looked at her. I understand, I said. Jessica blinked. I think she was expecting an argument. Maybe tears. Maybe the desperate negotiating that probably happened in the 340 other meetings she'd had this month. You understand, she repeated. Perfectly. I stood up. Don't you want to review the severance terms? I'm sure they're fine. I walked to the door. Then I stopped. Jessica. Yes? Good luck. I meant it. If you've ever had a boss or been in a situation like this, hit that like button and subscribe. I cleaned out my desk in the basement that same afternoon. It didn't take long. 23 years, and what I had to show for it fit in a single cardboard box. A photo of Linda from our trip to Maine. A Navy coffee mug with the USS Helena insignia. A stress ball shaped like a server rack that Marcus from networking had given me as a joke in 2015. Marcus was gone too. Laid off in the first wave, 3 weeks before me. The security guard who walked me out was a kid named Danny. Couldn't have been older than 24. He looked embarrassed the whole time, like he was escorting a criminal instead of a man who'd kept this building's heart beating for 2 decades. "I'm sorry, Mr. Reynolds," he said as we reached the lobby. "Don't be." I handed him my badge. He swiped it through the system. Somewhere in a database, my access to Metrotech's facilities was revoked. That was it. 23 years. Click. I drove home through rush hour traffic. The radio was playing something I didn't recognize. Everything on the radio these days sounds the same to me. Linda used to tease me about that. "You're not old, Tom. You're just selective." I pulled into the driveway at 5:47 p.m. Rex was waiting at the door, tail wagging. He's a yellow lab, 8 years old now. Linda picked him out from a shelter the year before she got sick. She said every house needed a dog, and she was right. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon. The good stuff. The bottle Linda gave me for our 25th anniversary that I'd been saving for special occasions. Getting fired seemed special enough. Rex sat at my feet while I watched the sun go down through the kitchen window. I thought about calling my son, David. He's 28 now, lives in Denver, works for some software company I don't fully understand. We talk every few weeks. He'd want to know, but I didn't call. Not yet. Instead, I did the math. My pension was vested. I had 23 years of contributions to the 401k. Social Security would kick in at 62, but I could draw early at a reduced rate. The house was paid off. Linda's life insurance had covered the medical bills and then some. I could survive. It wouldn't be comfortable. It wouldn't be the retirement Linda and I had planned, with the trips to Italy and the fishing cabin in Minnesota. But I could survive. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The thing about data centers is that they don't care about corporate politics. They don't care about efficiency audits, or MBA consultants, or PowerPoint presentations. They care about physics. Servers generate heat. Heat damages components. Components fail. Transactions stop. Banks can't process payroll. Mortgages don't close. Car loans don't fund. The cooling system in Metrotech's basement was designed in 2003, 21 years ago. It was retrofitted onto infrastructure that was already a decade old. The engineers who designed it are retired or dead. The documentation was lost in a merger. The system has 3 layers of redundancy. The primary cooling runs on a standard automated cycle. If primary fails, secondary kicks in automatically. If secondary fails, tertiary activates and sends an alert to the monitoring system. But if all 3 fail simultaneously, which shouldn't happen but can happen if, say, a firmware update conflicts with legacy protocols, the system requires a manual override. That override requires physical presence at Control Panel 7 in the basement sublevel. It requires a 47-character alphanumeric code. And it requires someone who knows that the sequence has to be entered within 4 minutes and 30 seconds of the tertiary failure, or the system locks permanently and requires a complete hardware reset that takes 72 hours minimum. Jessica Thornton didn't know any of this. How could she? She never came to the basement. I spent the first 2 weeks of my unemployment doing absolutely nothing. I woke up when Rex woke me. I made coffee. I read the paper. I watched the Cardinals lose. I grilled steaks on the back deck and ate them alone while the stars came out. It was peaceful. Quiet. The kind of quiet that used to terrify me. But something had shifted. Maybe it was the way Jessica had looked at me, like I was a number on a spreadsheet instead of a human being. Maybe it was hearing my 23 years of service reduced to suboptimal allocation of resources. Or maybe I was just finally tired. The call came on May 2nd at 3:47 p.m. I was in the garage organizing Linda's gardening tools. I'd been meaning to do it for 4 years. Never had the time. Now I had nothing but time. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Same number. I let it go again. The 3rd time I answered. "Mr. Reynolds?" The voice was young, panicked. I recognized it after a moment. Danny, the security guard who'd walked me out. Danny? Mr. Reynolds, I'm not supposed to be calling you, but something's happening. Something bad. I leaned against Linda's potting bench. What kind of bad? The basement, the servers, everything's overheating. The alarms have been going off for 20 minutes, and nobody knows what to do. They called the IT director, and he called some outside company, and they can't get the cooling system to respond. I looked at the thermometer on the garage wall. It was May in the Midwest. We'd hit 94 degrees that afternoon. First real heat of the season. The primary cooling failed. All of them. All three. There's some kind of panel that keeps flashing red, and nobody knows the code. Control panel 7. Danny, who told you to call me? Nobody. I remembered walking you out. How everyone said you were the only one who really understood the basement. I found your number in the old employee directory. Good kid. Danny, listen to me carefully. Is Jessica Thornton there? She's in the server room with the CEO and like 15 other people. They're all screaming at each other. Good. I hung up. The phone rang again almost immediately. This time, I recognized the number. Metrotech corporate headquarters. The main line. I watched it ring. 4 times. 5 times. I thought about 340 regional banks. About payroll deposits and mortgage payments and car loans. About the thousands of people who depended on systems they'd never seen, maintained by people they'd never know. Then, I thought about Jessica Thornton's face when she called my salary a waste of resources. I let it go to voicemail. The text started coming at 4:15 p.m. First from the IT director, whose name I barely remembered. Then from the CFO. Then from someone in legal whose number I didn't have saved. The voicemails piled up. I didn't listen to them. At 4:52 p.m., my phone showed 23 missed calls. At 5:31 p.m., the number hit 47. Rex watched me from his bed in the corner of the living room. He could tell something was different. Dogs always know. At 6:15 p.m., the CEO called personally. I knew it was him because his name popped up on the screen. Robert Hartwell. I'd met him exactly twice in 23 years. Once at a company picnic in 2018. Once in an elevator where he'd looked right through me like I was furniture. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. Then I answered. Tom Reynolds speaking. Tom. His voice was ragged, desperate. The voice of a man watching $4.2 million in server infrastructure melt. Tom, we need you. The cooling system, the manual override. Nobody knows. I'm retired, Mr. Hartwell. I know, but there must be something. Some documentation. Something you can tell us over the phone? There isn't. Silence. I could hear chaos in the background. Alarms. Shouting. Someone crying. Tom, please. We're looking at catastrophic failure. The banks, the transactions, people's money. I understand. Then help us. I poured myself another finger of bourbon. Took a slow sip. Let him wait. Mr. Hartwell, I spent 23 years keeping that basement running. I missed my son's graduation. I worked through my wife's illness. I gave everything I had to Metrotech. I know, and we appreciate. Jessica Thornton called me a waste of resources. Silence. She said my position was redundant. More silence. Mr. Hartwell, I'm retired, but I'm available as an external contractor. A contractor? My emergency consulting rate is $50,000. Flat fee. Payment required before I enter the building. I heard him suck in a breath. $50,000? That's correct. Tom, that's half of what you paid Jessica Thornton for a single month of her services. I checked. Public filings. The alarms were getting louder on his end. Someone was shouting about server temperatures hitting critical thresholds. Tom, we don't have time to negotiate. The system... I'm not negotiating, Mr. Hartwell. I'm telling you my rate. Fine. The word came out like he was spitting glass. Fine. 50,000. I'll have accounting wire it immediately. I'll need confirmation before I leave my house. You'll have it. I hung up. Rex lifted his head and looked at me. I scratched behind his ears. Good boy, I said. We're going for a drive. The wire confirmation hit my phone at 6:47 p.m. $50,000. Deposited. I screenshot it and saved it to 3 different places. Then I got in my truck and drove downtown. The parking garage at Metrotech was chaos. Emergency vehicles. IT contractors running around with equipment they didn't know how to use. Security guards directing traffic like they were managing a disaster zone, which they were. I parked in the visitor lot, walked to the main entrance. Danny was there, eyes wide. Mr. Reynolds. Evening, Danny. They're waiting for you in the basement. I know. The elevator ride down took 47 seconds. I counted. The doors opened to a wall of heat and the smell of burning electronics. The server room was full of people. The IT director. 3 technicians I didn't recognize. 2 men in suits who were probably lawyers. The CFO, pacing and sweating through his shirt. And Jessica Thornton. She was standing by control panel 7, staring at the flashing red display like it was written in a foreign language, which, to her, it was. Robert Hartwell saw me first. Tom. He crossed the room in 4 steps, hand extended. Thank God. What do you need? I didn't shake his hand. I need everyone who doesn't work in this department to leave. But now. Hartwell hesitated. Then he nodded. Everyone out. Clear the room. The lawyers left first. Then the CFO. The technicians filed out, relief on their faces. Jessica didn't move. Miss Thornton, I said. That includes you. She looked at Hartwell. He looked at the floor. Jessica, please. Her face went through several colors. Confusion. Anger. Something that might have been the first flicker of understanding. This is ridiculous, she said. You can't just... I can, I said. And I am. She looked at me then. Really looked at me. Maybe for the first time. You planned this. No, Miss Thornton. I just knew what you didn't. There's a difference. She walked out. Her heels clicked against the concrete floor. The door sealed behind her. I turned to the control panel. The display showed what I expected. All 3 cooling systems locked in cascade failure. Tertiary shutdown initiated. Manual override required. Time remaining. 2 minutes. 14 seconds. Plenty of time. I entered the code. 47 characters. I didn't need to think about it. My fingers remembered the sequence, the way they remembered how to tie my shoes. The panel beeped. Once. Twice. The red lights turned amber, then green. The cooling fans roared back to life. The temperature readout started dropping. 147 degrees. 142. 138. I stood there for a moment, listening to the hum. The sound I'd heard every day for 23 years. The sound nobody else even noticed. Then I walked out. The boardroom on the 6th floor was full when I arrived. Hartwell had gathered the executive team, the lawyers, the head of HR. Jessica was there too, sitting at the far end of the table with her arms crossed. I took the empty chair at the head of the table. Nobody objected. The system is stable, I said. Temperatures are returning to normal. You'll want to run a full diagnostic in 24 hours to check for component damage, but my preliminary assessment is that you avoided catastrophic failure by approximately 6 minutes. Hartwell exhaled. Thank you, Tom. We can't tell you how... I'm not finished. The room went quiet. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folder. Printouts I'd made that afternoon, once I'd realized what was happening. This is a summary of every critical system in your basement that requires specialized knowledge to operate. 23 systems total. 14 of them have no documentation. 7 have documentation that's more than 15 years out of date and references hardware that's been replaced. 2 have documentation that's simply wrong. I slid the folder across the table toward Hartwell. I maintained all of these systems personally. I am, as of today, the only person on the planet who knows how they work. Jessica shifted in her chair. Your efficiency audit, I continued, identified my $95,000 salary as a waste of resources. What it failed to identify was that my departure created a single point of failure across your entire legacy infrastructure. I looked at Jessica. You never came to the basement, Ms. Thornton. You never asked what I did. You never asked how the systems worked. You looked at a number on a spreadsheet and decided it was too high. She said nothing. The total value of transactions processed through Metrotech systems today alone was $847 million. If those systems had gone down permanently, the reputational damage, the regulatory fines, the client lawsuits, they would have cost this company everything. I stood up. My consulting rate going forward is $400 per hour, with a minimum engagement of 40 hours per month. I'll provide documentation services to transfer my institutional knowledge to your current staff. That process will take approximately 18 months. Hartwell blinked. 18 months? You can try to do it faster, but you won't. Because every time you cut a corner, you risk another cascade failure. And next time, I might not answer my phone. I walked toward the door. Tom, I stopped. It was Jessica's voice. I made a mistake. I turned around. She was standing now. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking slightly. Yes, I said. You did. I left. The contract arrived by courier the next morning. $400 per hour. 40 hours minimum per month. 18-month term. Plus a clause guaranteeing that any future workforce reductions in the infrastructure department would require my written approval. I signed it at my kitchen table while Rex watched. The $50,000 emergency fee cleared my bank account 3 days later. I used part of it to book a trip to Italy. The trip Linda and I had always talked about. I'd go alone, but I'd bring her picture. The rest went into David's college fund for his kids, whenever he has them. Jessica Thornton resigned from Thornton Consulting Group 6 weeks later. I heard through Danny that she'd taken a job at a nonprofit in Seattle. Something about sustainable agriculture. Good for her. Maybe she'd learned to look at the whole system before deciding what to cut. The documentation project took 16 months. I trained 4 engineers, 2 of whom were fresh out of college. They were good kids, eager to learn. They asked questions that nobody had asked me in 20 years. On my last day as a contractor, Hartwell called me into his office. Tom, I want to apologize for everything, for how you were treated, for taking you for granted. I looked at him, at his corner office with the view of downtown, at the photos on his wall of himself with senators and CEOs. Mr. Hartwell, you didn't take me for granted. You didn't think about me at all. There's a difference. He didn't have an answer for that. I walked out of Metrotech for the final time at 4:15 p.m. on a Thursday, the same time I'd been fired 14 months earlier. Danny was at the front desk. He stood up when he saw me. Mr. Reynolds. Tom, I said. Call me Tom. He grinned. You take care of yourself, Tom. You too, Danny. I drove home through rush hour. The radio was playing something I didn't recognize. I turned it off and drove in silence. That night, I sat on the back deck with Rex at my feet and 3 fingers of bourbon in my hand. The good stuff. The stars were coming out over the oak trees. I thought about Linda, about what she would have said about all of this. She would have laughed. Then she would have said, I should have asked for $100,000. She was probably right. My phone buzzed. A text from David. Dad, heard you finally retired for real. Proud of you. Coming to visit next month. Want to throw a ball around? I typed back, always. Then I put the phone down and watch the night settle in. Sometimes the people who keep the lights on are the last ones anyone thinks about. We work in basements and server rooms and substations. We're not in meetings. We're not on LinkedIn. We don't have MBA degrees or $400 haircuts. But when the lights go out, they call us. And sometimes, when they've forgotten what we're worth, we get to remind them. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe and ring that notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.